Hello everyone, in this video we're going to be talking about property blocks and how you can use property blocks to save and manipulate data in your experience. Let's go ahead and get started by clicking on Create Experience. So I'm just going to style my character scene really quick. We'll go into Jiffy Cat and we will use this yellow cat cartoon character, and let's type property blocks here at the top. Now what we're going to do is go into the Add New menu and explore the property blocks a little bit. So you'll notice that there are three types of property blocks. There are user properties, there are experience properties, and there are environment properties. I'm just going to be sticking with user properties for the purposes of this tutorial, but understand that each of these property blocks work in the exact same way. I'll explain the differences at the end of the video, so stay tuned. Let's go ahead and add an increment user property by value block. And what this is going to do is it's going to increment the data by the value we set. What that means is that we have a number here and we're going to increment the value by this number. So we need to give all of our properties a name, and this is the name you're going to be accessing when you want to manipulate that data. So I'm going to call this one tutorial points, and then we will just set the value to increment by to 1, but you can change this to whatever number you'd like. Let's go ahead and add a button that says increment, and we'll link to this increment user property by value block. Now what I'm going to show you is how to display that in your experience. So we have another scene here, and we're going to say something like your tutorial score is, and then we're going to use some special syntax to display the property. That's $, curly brackets. You want to make sure that you're not using regular parentheses or square brackets, but instead curly brackets. And then inside of these brackets, we're going to type props dot, and then we're going to use the property name. Now I'm just going to go ahead, copy this property name, and then paste it right in between the period and the curly bracket. There we go, props.tutorial_points. And you want to make sure that your name is specific to your experience. The more specific you can get, the better, because you don't want somebody else overriding your property. Let's go ahead and link this to the scene, and then we'll have a button that says back to menu. We'll link that back to the main menu here. So what's going on here so far? Well, we have a property called tutorial points, and we're incrementing that value by 1. So if we ran this starting off at 0, we would expect it to be 1 here, and every time we clicked on this increment, we would add 1 to this data value. Now there are two more blocks I want to show you, so we'll go into Add New. The next thing we're going to add from user properties is decrement user property by value. And this is very similar to the leaderboard blocks that we used earlier, so let's go ahead and add another button that says decrement. We will link it to the block, and then we're going to use the same key name. So we'll copy that and we will paste it in the key here. We will decrement by 1 here. Now let's link it up. So if we tapped on the decrement button, it would decrement the value. It would subtract 1 from whatever value tutorial points is. The next block I want to show you is the check user property block. So let me go ahead and add that. I will drag that underneath the decrement user property by value block, and then let's explore it a little bit. So it's using the same key name, so we're going to use that same key name, copy, and paste it into the key name here. And then underneath we have a comparator, and this is going to take in a value and see if your data matches the comparator that you set. So let's set the value. I'm going to check and see if it's equal to 5 points. So if it's not equal to 5 points, then it will fail the check. You can also run does not equal or greater than or less than, but I'm going to keep it at equal. So what this is going to do is if it equals 5, it's going to count it as a success. If it doesn't equal 5, it's going to count it as a failure. And because of these two branching paths, we're going to add 2 more character scenes. So let me drag this one down here. I'll zoom out a little bit and I will drag this one here. So we're going to say in the first one equals 5, and in the second one does not equal 5. For success, we're going to go to this first scene, and for failed check, we're going to go to the second scene. Let's also add a button that says check, and we're going to link that to the block. Finally, we will add buttons for back to menu and back to menu. And we'll link these back to our menu. So let me just drag these blocks down a little bit so you can see what's going on. There we go. The last block I want to show you is called the set user property block. So we're going to go into user properties, select set user property, and then we will put this directly underneath the check block. I'll add a button that says set, and then we will link that to the block. Now this is just going to allow you to set the value of the block rather than adding or subtracting the value from the block. Let's click on it. Just like before, it needs a key name, so we're going to copy and paste the key name we've been using. And what I want to do here is set the value to 0. But we need to do one more thing. The set user property block, by default, is going to save it as a string, as a text value. So we actually need to go into edit code here, and we need to change this line, line 22, from string to number so that it sets a number value. We also need to make sure that this 0 does not have quotes around it. So I'm just going to highlight it and replace it with a regular 0. You'll see that the color also changed from red to aqua green. Now we'll save the block, and it should be saving a number value. Now let's add a transition back to the top one, and if you tap on set, you should see it go through the set user property block, set that data value to 0, and then it will display 0 here. So now we have a fully functioning experience. I'm going to add an end experience button here that will end the experience. And let me just go into add new and quickly explain the differences between all of these different property blocks. So we talked about user properties, but where does that data actually live? User properties are tied specifically to the user that interacts with the block. So if I interact with a user property block, I will have my own value, and if you interact with that same block, you will have your own value. These are two different data values that are being stored separately on our own accounts. Experience property blocks live in the experience. They are created and destroyed when the experience opens and closes. What that means is that even though you'll have this property while the experience is going on, if you exit the experience and come back in, that data value no longer exists until you interact with that block again. The experience property blocks in particular are really good for tracking a score within a single experience, while the user properties would be great for tracking a score across multiple experiences. Lastly, the environment property blocks are global data values. What that means is that anybody interacting with that block will affect that single data value. So if I interact with that block, it will affect that data value, and if you interact with that block, you will also be affecting the same data value. So this is good if you're trying to track the total number of times that a group of people have interacted with an experience. Let me exit out of here. I hope this all made sense. If it doesn't, feel free to ask me anytime in this help chat line for help with your property blocks, and I'll be happy to explain more to you. You should also check out our Learn page to learn more about all of the different property blocks that you can use. I'm going to go ahead and publish this experience. We'll call this property blocks and click publish. Now let me zoom in so that you can scan this QR code and try it out for yourself. I recommend that you use property blocks. They're actually very, very useful in your experiences, and if you take a little bit of time to learn how they work, you're going to take your experiences to a higher level than you would if you didn't use property blocks at all. I hope you learned a lot about property blocks and how you can use them to save and manipulate data in your experience, and we will see you next time.